development. There were 20 districts that agreed that we would jointly work towards the common goal. And the district that brought us all together is really 227. And so the commission school, all the commission high schools and some of the commission elementary schools will meet on April 6th, which is Institute Day, the Common Institute Day for all of us at the Tinley Park Convention Center. At this point, it's my understanding that there are over 2,000 teachers and administrators from the various districts. We are sending our 7th and 8th grade through 12th grade teachers and administrators. Here in this building, we're having an Institute Day and staff development for pre-K through 6th grade. Some of the districts obviously either could not coordinate their calendars or are choosing not to participate, but 2,000 educators in one place at one time, that is sizable. One of the things that we saw is collectively, we can afford to hire almost anyone to present, but it's my understanding that Dr. Thomas is also providing staff development for janitors, for secretaries, food service. We're not participating in that aspect of it. We think that we do a terrific job with that, but we are sending all of our teachers in those grades that I mentioned, 7 through 12, as well as the administrators. And then we have a staff development schedule here that we're going to be doing, and as well as presenters that are coming in. But some districts are closing down totally, as is 227, and sending them. Others are going their own way. For example, 159 is doing something separate and apart from the group. I don't know the specificity, but it depends on the district. But there are a minimum of 20 districts. But I would say it's at least 7 years since this has happened. But the original concept was that the rich districts joined together at the township. And I remember Barbara Sizemore was the last presenter at the township when we went there, but it was some time ago and under a different administration. But that's what April 6th looks like. April 7th is Good Friday through the 14th is our spring break. April 17th, our students return to school, and our next board meeting is April 18th.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. Are there any questions from my board colleagues for the superintendent?
I have a question, Dr. Davis.
Member McCray.
Fabulous idea. Question, is this to align the curriculum? Is this to?
It's a collaborative staff development. Some of our teachers are presenting. This was on a volunteer basis. I think this is the first in a series of collaborations, but the purpose of it is not to address specifically curriculum and instruction issues, but a wide range of things. But I think of it as building a partnership. But what I saw, and this is absolutely not a complaint, is that it leans towards the departmentalized students. In other words, 7th and 8th grade, et cetera. And we need to concentrate on some different areas in terms of the younger children. And so that's what we're doing. But I think it's the first step. There are some speakers that the team has, not our team, but the planning team has looked at to bring them together. In addition to that, I was going to include this in my regular report, but on April 5th, and we have participated in this as a board for years and years and years. So I'll send you this in writing, but April 5th is the Ron Edmonds Scholarship and Board Recognition Gala. We will, as usual, as many of you as can, will attend. And
Finley Park?
We're going to give a lot of scholarships also.
Finley
So
Park?
I think it's just a wonderful thing. This will be at Tinley Park also on the 5th at 6 o'clock, but I'll send you that. But you know that every board that is present will be recognized, and I look forward to that. But I particularly look forward to the students who will join us. There are 8 high schools in the South Suburban area, and the 8 high schools will be represented, and students from those 8 high schools will receive scholarships. I think that you're well aware that we gave leadership to a United Negro College Fund joint effort between the commission and UNCF, $210,000 as we're counting. We now have an extra $80,000 to distribute in scholarships on that night. And so there is a scholarship committee separate and apart from us that is looking at all of the applications. As I understand it, there were 217 young people who are applying. So I'm looking forward to that. And then our high school is providing the entertainment. They put names into a hat and pull out the high school name for the various events. And our name was pulled out to provide entertainment for the evening. So I think it's more than a partnership. It's a celebration of excellence. So that is the afternoon and evening that I'm looking forward to. And I'll send you more information about it.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. At this time, we'll call for audience to visitors pertaining to agenda items only. This is a moment where members of the audience who may wish to speak about an item that's on the agenda may come forward, giving first your name, then your address, and then thirdly, the issue that is on the agenda about which you wish to speak. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board at this time? There being no one, we'll move along to the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Yes, please. Move to approve the consent agenda dated March 21st, 2023, and every item contained therein.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
No, Mr. President.
Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson, Mr. Johnson, Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mr. Bean.
Aye.
Thank you. And now for the superintendent's report. Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday was a difficult day for us in that we were not aware that Park Forest was going to build, and please excuse the fact that I don't know the nuances of that, so the why of it, but add another water tower to the existing tower. And they did begin this process, but as they began the process, the water pressure in our 2 schools, Indiana and Illinois, began to decrease. And so the principals did call me. Eventually, the Illinois had no water pressure whatsoever. And the pressure at the Indiana was extremely low. We contacted them to ask them the nuances of this and why we were not aware of this. And we also contacted 163. It was difficult immediately for us to get a response. However, at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, Mr. Mark Walzak, who is Director of Buildings and Grounds, did meet with representatives from the Building and Grounds Department at Park Forest and discuss this. A little humor. It was the only humor I had yesterday because someone mentioned porta potties. We don't do porta potties. Porta potties are filthy things that we don't do. So we told them that that was helpful, but not for us. And so as we began to look at the time frame of this, they indicated to us that by 6 p.m. they intended to have some water pressure. By 10 o'clock that night, they would be at a point where we would be able to use our toilets, but our parents need more notification than that. And as you know, you approved an e-learning partnership some time ago. And so we did take an e-learning day, not for the district, but just for the two schools. We also called our own plumbers because we could see that what little water that was coming out of the Indiana faucets was discolored. And so we wanted our own plumbers to flush out the system, but this takes time. And so we notified our parents at approximately 6 o'clock yesterday evening that we would be doing e-learning. The teachers would come in at their usual time, but we will be up with instruction and live. And it did my heart well because of the fact that the teachers have this down. They're able to do this just a few hours notice. And so the teachers were in the school. We did buy skids of water for the teachers. There was no issue with them. And then the water pressure began to come on in the course of the day. And so as we sit here right now, we do have water pressure, full water pressure in the Illinois and Indiana. However, yesterday at approximately, well, I think it was midnight, I received a text message indicating that they were going to do a boil order for parts of Park Forest. We can't depend upon, are we one step into the boil? So we're going for the rest of the week on bottled water. And a truckload pulled up today, another truckload pull up tomorrow. We will stay on bottled water until further notice. And it's not an issue with us, but we can't simply, we don't boil water. I mean, it just doesn't work. So there's water coming into the building, we can flush, and then we don't have an issue with the children and the teachers and volunteers being able to drink fresh water. But it was an interesting day. It's just that timeline made me make the decision that just those two schools, not the district, had to go on e-learning. And so I'd like to answer any questions about that, about the rationale or how this happened, but
It's pretty clear how it happened. But
yes, it's
our
clear how
response
it
was
happened.
great to
And
it.
we're grateful to Park Forest that they resolved the issue. I think that they continued to build a water tower. As I tell you, I cannot tell you the reasoning behind that. I'm just interested in our two schools and the fact that we do have water pressure and that we are going to, and we did this with COVID, you know, we had bottled water. Some of us are still doing this. That's not an issue for us. What is an issue is we're beginning to start our testing season. We would have started today. We did not begin in those schools today, the IRA. And so we will allow the students to come back in and to resettle, because remember, when you take a test, it's a mindset exercise. And then we will begin with the IRA at those two particular schools.
Thank you. And we certainly appreciate the way in which you and your team handled the response to an issue that really not only was challenging, but quite frankly, was unforeseen.
True.
Yes, Mr. President, it was unforeseen. But moving on, Parent University comes up after being down for COVID. So Mrs. Dusky, would you please, what is it that we're going to be doing? I know this is the first of many, but March 30th.
Good evening, board, and thank you.
evening.
So on March, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So on March 30th is going to be the first Parent University, and it's going to be here in this building. We're going to use we call them the fishbowl rooms. So the rooms at the end of the hall that have quite a bit of space available in the room. So what we did is we got together with a group of parents, interested parents that volunteered to be part of the team. We worked with them on a couple of occasions and they gave us some ideas. So then from there, we created a survey that was sent to everybody. We got 288 responses, which is pretty good for the first time we've surveyed parents to see what they were interested in doing. And they came up with several great ideas. So I put a flyer on all of your stands and you'll see on that day, we're going to have 3 topics. Cyber safety, which is going to be presented by our famous, is he here? Daniel Evans. He's going to do that presentation for the parents. And it's really what's the parents' role in cyber safety, because parents have a big responsibility, as we all know, to keeping their children safe and keeping all of the other children safe while we're here at school. The second is establishing positive parent-teacher relationships. And I was surprised how high on the list that was when we surveyed the families. So we have an expert from UIC coming out. He's a national presenter that is going to come to us for that day. His name is, it slipped my mind, Alan Bryson. So he is a director of communications there, or he's at the university, and he's also a nationally known public speaker. So he does a lot of keynotes and things like that. So we're excited to see his presentation. And then finally, we have balancing work and family, which was also very high on the list. And we're going to have Laura Fisher, who's done a lot of our teacher and parent trainings in the past. She's a former assistant superintendent of curriculum. She also worked at Speed, so we've been connected for quite a while. She's going to come and do that presentation. So the parents will be able to select 2 of the 3 presentations that night. They'll each be 45 minutes. And our parent group has also agreed to be greeters. They're going to be timekeepers. They're going to collect evaluations for us at each of the meetings. So they will have a continuing role as committee members to help us get through Parent University. We're also going to have some raffles, and principals and assistant principals are also helping get the word out. This is now on all of the school web pages and Southland webpage and Madison 162 webpage. And then there's a registration that they can link right into. They'll fill out their name, the school that their children attend, and they'll select, not that they have to stick with their selection, but it'll give us an idea of how many people will want to be in each of the rooms. So we make sure we have enough tables and chairs, desks in there. And we're also going to have light refreshments for the parents that come. And then in addition to this day, because the highest topic on there that outseated, every other recommendation was social emotional supports for parents and students. So we decided to do a separate one, and that would be the only topic that night. That's going to be on April 20th. That will also be here, but we decided to do those separately because that was such a high request that we didn't think it'd be fair to the other presenters, because everybody'd want to go to that one, and we wanted to make sure they had more than one topic to do that. So we're excited. We have a good response, from parents who took the survey. I think once the word gets out, we already have 35 to 40 registered. So one of the schools was a overachiever, and they got the registration sent out quickly. So we think that we'll have a good response to that, and we're excited to begin the process again and have a lot of training for our parents. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Dusky.
Okay.
There was a parent in the building today registering for kindergarten, and she saw the flyer. She inquired, I'm not a parent of the district yet. I'm registering for next year. Any parent is more than welcome to come. It doesn't make any, it's just a district number. So we don't really care about that. Wherever you hear about this information, you can go online, you can register. But something that I think is equally as important, Mrs. Dusky mentioned SEL, but the question of transitions is on the minds of the parents. In other words, most of our schools, with the exception of Illinois, and by the way, I'm remiss, the person that is not here is Dr. Shanita Mays, but she isn't here for a good reason. let's let her husband know we're so glad she brought him home from the hospital today. So Dr. Mays. We're happy about that, but she returned to her school part-time last week. She's back full-time now. But we're happy that he's coming out of the hospital. But with the exception of the Illinois, that's our only K-8 school. So parents have been asking, how do we prepare for the transition from, in particular, how do they prepare to transition from the 6th grade to the 7th and 8th grade? You know, this is the time that they go from what is basically a self-contained classroom into a more college, high school environment. And I don't want to say it troubles parents, but they want to be prepared for it. So we're working on some ideas and we'll come back to the board in April. But one of the things that was suggested by Dr. Mays as she was sitting in the hospital, there's no reason why we cannot use our district office building. You know, the Hoof this summer will be down. For 2 summers, it will be down. Huge construction going on there. So we're using the 3rd floor. But what if we created a middle school transition program and kids went from class to class and they got this sense, okay? And we taught organization skills, time management skills, a lot of other things. And so that's what we're working on now and talking with the teachers. I do feel that that's probably the most difficult transition that they make. So we're looking at that and we'll come back to the board with additional information as we move forward. But the SALC is working on transitions with the Madison, because you know the 3rd grade, they leave 3rd grade, then they go into 4th grade. That's a little different. And the Indiana has some very creative ideas. They're working with the Arcadia. But somehow this idea of the middle school transition kind of intrigues me. And I don't know what your thoughts are, but that's something that we're planning on doing this summer. And the building is ours. We can redefine that period of time any way that we choose to. So why not make this a little easier for the children and introduce them to some of the faces? Because I think that's an issue. They've been in this building. They get to know the teachers and perhaps they feel a little lost. I don't know. But we can certainly staff it with teachers and administrators that they would see in the course of a day. But the Hoof is large. Just to bring to the board's attention that when I first came, we housed 1,000 children. We housed 1,000 children. And they, every 45 minutes, they change class. But what we saw, and the reason we made this decision as administration and a board, is that 6th grade was a little young for them to have that kind of experience. And that's why we pulled back and we restructured the district and created kindergarten through 3rd and 4th, 5th, and 6th. But that's something we're interested in. I don't know if there are opinions about a middle school transition, but it's an idea that I think is a good one.
Mr. President. Oh, please.
Yes, Vice President Bean and then Dr. Leatherwood.
One thought about middle school transition, having gone through that 5 times in my home. The one issue that comes up, and I think would be good to consider, is note taking. How do the students synthesize the lectures that they hear and the information that they hear and be able to take cogent notes? So that's very, very important.
We have, because, well, at the beginning of 2020, we thought we were going to open. We didn't. So we're now the proud owners of 1,000 organizational tablets, and we have those to distribute now, now that we're fully open. So I really think this is a good idea, and the principals as well as the teachers are working on it. So we will give you a complete report at the next meeting. But I see Mr. Stanton, and Mr. Stanton, I
Dr.
want to-
Davis, if I may.
I'm
Dr.
sorry.
Leatherwood.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So sorry to keep you from your additional transition. But I think it's very important that we have this conversation. We know from extant literature that the transition period is a hard one for students. On average, students do worse, right? Academically, that there's a break in their trajectory, their academic learning that seems to occur during those transition periods. So the fact that you're thinking about that is really, really phenomenal. And the fact that Mr. Bean will bring up this, an ideal for how we can better support our students is even better. What I might recommend is that there is literature out there about this topic. And I think that we can find a few papers that would give us some indication or push us in the right direction toward what factors are associated with these dips in academic achievement for students as they transition from from like elementary school to middle school. And I think if we can take some of those factors and really think hard about our student population, because they may not match one for one, but think really hard about our student population, I think we can land on a few things that we can, cherry pick and then implement as it concerns making sure our students are in a better shape as they transition from one education unit to another. So that was the first thing. And but I'm excited for what it could look like. And I appreciate that foresight. And I think that it's gonna, this is what I was gonna say. This is the last thing I was getting to it. I was like, I'm missing something. It's amazing because we're already doing so well. We know that 162 is one of the strongest performing districts in the nation for Black students in particular. So what's amazing is that it can only probably make things better. All right. So I think that this is going to be really a phenomenal experiment. And I think it's going to bode well for our little ones as they transition from one unit to the other.
May I ask if you would bring some of those articles to our attention?
Absolutely. I can do a search. If there's somebody I can partner with, is there anybody that does research in the
Is Dr. Rupert here? Okay, Dr. Rupert. He can certainly partner, and he does most of our research, and
Good.
he's our data person when it comes to grant writing and all of that. So, but you can partner with me also.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll look forward to, before we get out of here, it'd be nice if we can connect and then we can get those papers sent out tomorrow. And then we can make sure that we're in conversation, because if you want to, have a partner in conversing about this, then we don't just have to read the paper, and just take it on face value, but we can talk about the methods and what we think is going to be most appropriate for our student population. So why don't we connect before, as we transition from this meeting, and then see what we can make happen. Is that okay? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Leatherwood mentioned something that I have not mentioned to the board. Because in a way I'm conflicted, but he mentioned our standing as an African-American district. We were in 2019, #1 in the state. There is no national ranking simply because we don't all take the same exam, but we were #1 in math and English language arts in 2019. And as the scores came out in October, we are #1 in the state once again in those two areas. And the reason that I didn't mention it is because I would love to say that regardless of the way that anyone looks, regardless of poverty, regardless of this, that, and the other, that we are #1 looking at any kind of criteria. That is not true. But if you're looking at African-American districts, we have been, and we have been for many years. And what I wanted to see is what was going to happen. I told you that in math, we were turning this corner. And I also told you the teachers were thinking about this. And so that's one of the things that we're going to examine on April 6th. But I do have that data, and if it be the will of the board, then I certainly would bring it to you. But Dr. Leatherwood has been researching us. So that's where we are. But Mr. Stanton, spelling bee is something that you do a magnificent job for. So tell us about our spelling bee, tell us about the region, because we host it. And then I think that you have a young person to bring to our team.
Good evening, board.
Good evening.
Tonight we have with us the first place winner from this year's spelling bee, which we held on February 2nd. Emmanuel Stephen Setka, an 8th grader from Illinois, was this year's winner. Emmanuel, along with 29 other students from grades 3 through 8 throughout the district, participated in the bees. They worked with their coaches every week beginning in September. Couple of observations. First of all, over the years, as I have been involved with spelling bee, I've noticed a couple of things. One, they're family affairs. Families are really a part of the spelling bee team. Parents and siblings work with their student speller in preparation for the spelling bee. The other thing I've observed is at the spelling bee, when a youngster is up to spell, I, along with many others, as they're spelling the word, I'm spelling it in my head. And, but what I don't want to admit to you is how many words I misspelled. So I would like Emmanuel to come on up along with Ashley Hanson. Ashley is our spelling bee coordinator. She's been a coach. This year has been our spelling bee coordinator for the district and done that. Give us a go. I would like Emmanuel's mother to please come up. So Mrs. Hanson is at Illinois, so is Emmanuel. So she also is working with him throughout the year. So Emmanuel, congratulations for being a spelling bee champion in District 162 this year. How about another round?
And I'll just tell everyone, it's an iPad. It's your very own, and we give it to you with love. We're so proud of you. And I was very proud to be at the regional because you stood your own and you did a magnificent job. So thank you.
Congratulations. Congratulations. Thank you.
I would like to, would you like to share a few comments with us? We're friendly.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Elizabeth Dodu, and I'm the mother of Emmanuel Asidu Sechere. He's been with the district since kindergarten all the way to 8th grade. So I know almost everybody in the school, and they know me very because I'm a very active parent. So all we can say is thank you so much for all of your support, for all of the help of the teachers, for all of the effort that they put in our kids. We really appreciate them. All we can say is thank you and God bless each and every one of you.
It's one of my favorite competitions. I'll just say that. So. But I would like to give the board some information about summer school. As I mentioned earlier, we're closed at the Huth, and it's a hard close. By that, I mean, normally teachers and others are welcomed in. It will be a hard hat environment as we try to turn this around in 6 to 8 weeks and then go back next year to do the same thing. But we're also this summer, all 8 of our parking lots and playgrounds are going to be resurfaced. So we're going to be busy this summer in addition to obviously the project that we have next door. But something I learned from Mr. Wozak this week that I did not know. He said that most of the parking lots, because they were built years ago, were not built to hold the weight of school buses nor trucks. And that's why they end up cracking. I think that's amazing. First of all, they were building a school. Why wouldn't the surrounding area be strong enough to hold the weight of the buses? But this is what was shared with me the other day, because they were bringing in cement trucks. And I said, what difference does it make? So they shared that information that the cement trucks, if they came in across the parking lot, would leave cracks. But they also shared that at all of the schools, the reason that we have cracks, and it was 4 years ago, we resurfaced. Now we're resurfacing again. But because it was a bad year. But that the buses, because of the weight, remember the yellow buses weigh a great deal, but it makes cracks in the pavement. So every day I learned something that I did not know, and I certainly didn't know that. But this summer, all parking lots will be resurfaced. Mrs. McCray.
I don't know why I thought about Arcadia's parking lot years ago and how it had such an issue. Do you think the buses added to that?
I do
whole
think the buses, and
Eliza
if,
Delight?
for board members who were present some time ago, remember now we know, we didn't want to know that the parking lot was built over an old gas station, but it was. And as the parking lot years ago began to sink, then we saw these big, huge tanks that were never removed. As a district, we shouldered the expense of having those tanks removed. I thought it was not amazing. It was disturbing that all that was done was to pour cement in, which, as you know, after a while it begins to sink. Then the tanks that were underneath the parking lot began to leak oil. Mrs. Ransford was here at the time, and she had a sense of humor. She said, Dr. Davis, we struck oil, maybe it's worth money. We actually didn't. It cost us a lot of money to go in, dig the parking lot out, remove those tanks. And it was also an EPA issue, and they had to come in and make sure that we were safe. But it used to be years and years ago, an old gas station, and they left the tanks there. In the best of all possible worlds, and we don't live in the best of all possible worlds, we tried years ago, the Arcadia's parking lot is landlocked, if you can visualize it.
Yes.
But right next door, there seems to be, and we don't want to just take for granted, but there seems to be a vacant baseball field. If things were wonderful, could we appropriate by whatever the baseball field and give them enough room? Because if they have an event, you can barely turn around in there.
Right.
And I'm not saying that we can, and we're not being aggressive. At the time that we investigated this before, it belonged to the park district, and it may still. So we're streaming. I'm not saying anything, but in the best of all possible worlds, we would like to make it possible for the buses to turn around in a much more comfortable fashion, and for them to host an event and not have to park a couple of blocks down the street. But that's the history of the Arcadia. But all parking lots, we will go down 2 inches, I'm told, fill in the cracks, resurface, and start all over again, probably 4 to 5 years from now. So, but we will open, and we hope that we have time to do all of them. Obviously, they have to dry. But this summer, we're having Richardson Square Summer School PK. The Madison will house K through 3, the SALK, Dr. Morgan 4 through 6. And here at Southland, we'll have all kinds of children in this building. So we will have our transition, we hope. We have scheduled 7th and 8th grade summer school and all the other things that we have. But in addition to that, we do need a mandatory summer school for all students that are 1.5 and below, just as we usually have. That will occur. But this will be our first time since COVID coming back with our stream, which is more of an enrichment summer school with science, technology, fine arts, robotics, drones, and on and on. So there is a group working on that also. And of course, we have the performing arts. So we look forward to about 650 to 700 children coming for summer school, but you'll find out more about that. But currently, we're building teams, teachers, support staff, leadership. We have the timelines already, which we will share, and we're purchasing materials and curriculum needs. But we think it's going to be a large summer school. We think that parents are very receptive to their children doing something different. And I know, because I've heard this, that science, technology, STEM, we call it STREAM, and the fine arts will be something that they will want to take advantage of. Are there questions about this? Because we're going to segue into our CFO's report. It's a lot of information. Mr. Bean, please.
One question, it would be, I think, important when we repave the parking lots that we do that if we can in coordination with the library and the medical center, so that the throat that comes off of the street into our parking lot is also repaved, because it if you think our parking lots are in bad shape, the throat is in worse shape.
The what? I'm sorry, sir.
It's a, I call it the throat.
Okay.
It's a strip that goes from the street into past the library and the medical center into our parking lot. It also needs repaving. And if we could do that in coordination with those two entities, I think it would be important.
Well, we have been notified that the medical center is now closed. The owner has moved
Hmm.
and they have indicated that it's up for sale. So I don't think that they will be partnering with us. But one of the things that we're going to attempt to do, and we will, if we will begin this, I don't know if we can complete this. If you look at our sidewalks, they're not continuous. And so I think this is going to be our responsibility. But there will not be an involvement from the doctor who is now moved out of the state. And we'll see what kind of support and assistance that we receive from Richmond Park. They've always been very cooperative, so I don't doubt that. But trying to build a continuous sidewalk is one of the projects. But we do intend to do all of our schools. Mr. Inglet, we have a lot tonight. How are you?
I'm good, Dr. Davis. Thank you. Good evening, board.
Good evening.
We do have a lot tonight. I always have the boring parts, unfortunately, but we'll get through it. Okay, I just want to go through the business items that are on the agenda this evening and allow you the opportunity to ask any questions as we go through it. The first two items you'll see under new business, which really isn't new business for the board, honestly. We talked about this a lot during the tax levy time, and that is that the district once again received a property tax relief grant for FY23. And the district last year received the FY22 property tax relief grant. So the district is obligated, because they're accepting the grant, they're obligated to abate taxes once again for the second year on the 2022 grant and for the first year on this FY23 grant. So your first two resolutions, that's simply what those are, is following through with those abatements. Those are due to ISB and the county on March 30th. Obviously, we'll get those filed at the conclusion of this meeting. And then we should expect to receive the first payment on the grant with the 23 grant from ISB sometime in May. Next two items on the agenda will be bids. First is the completion of the security camera upgrades. That's at Arcadia, Illinois, Sauk, and Richmond Square. Mr. Evans has been working with the architects on finishing that project up. As you know, we already did that. We've already done that at Huth and Indiana and Madison. So this will complete that work. All those cameras will be integrated with all the updated systems once that project is complete. The second item is the exterior insulation and finishing system. That's next door over at the kitchen, commercial kitchen project. And that is actually the last bid that you should see related to any construction over there. So that'll complete that. Any questions so far before I move on? Okay. Eric. Oh, I'm sorry. The next one is alternate revenue bonds. So, and now that we know the final prices of everything in Nextdoor, we can go ahead and issue those bonds. Alternate revenue bonds simply are bonds that are paid for by a revenue source other than taxing the residents. So in this case, as we discussed, as the the kitchen builds out, we would expect that the revenue from the commercial kitchen coming in would pay for the majority of the payments on those bonds. And so it's a three-step process for issuing bonds. The first step involves two resolutions that you have before you this evening. The first is just passing a resolution indicating the notice of intent to issue the bonds. The second one is calling for a public hearing, which would be at the April board meeting. And then the final piece would be approval of the bonds at the May board meeting. Following that, our financial advisors would work with the market to go ahead and issue those bonds after the meeting, usually within a week or two after that final resolution is passed in May. The last item I want to touch on is the 23-24 transportation bid. And I have quite a few slides on this because I realize it may generate some discussion. So we went out to bid for transportation. I say 23-24, but it's really a 3-year bid. And we structured it in a couple different ways. And what we did is we gave bidders the option to bid on either the entire district, which is the setup that we have now with Kickert, The other option was bidders could bid on half of the district. So they could either bid on Arcadia, Indiana, Madison, Sauk, that half, or they could bid on Huth, Illinois, Richland Square, that half, or they could bid on both. And this was done on purpose for a couple of reasons. One is the district as a whole runs about, depending on if it's morning or afternoon or midday, about 56, 57 routes in a given day, which is a lot for a bus company to come in here who is not already established in this area and take that on. And it also, by offering the half district option, allows smaller companies that may want to bid on the project to successfully bid on as well. We also put another option in there. They could propose a bell time change if the price would be different, or if perhaps maybe that would allow them to bid on the project. So we ended up with 4 bidders. The first was Sunrise Transportation. They actually just bid on the special ed routes only. We only have 6 of those routes. So they did not propose on really the entire bid. The second was Positive Connections. The district does use Positive Connections right now at Huth. And we've been very happy with Positive Connections. They actually have been running routes in place of Kicker because Kicker just does not have the manpower to run the full complement of routes within the district. The issue with their bid is they came in at $211.53 per route. Just for reference, the district is right now paying about $97 per route. So they were the highest of the bids that we received. And then that was followed by Kicker, who proposed on each of the halves. And then a company called Safeway, I'll talk a little bit about more in depth here in a minute. They proposed on either the full district or the half that was Huth, Illinois, and Richland Square. So putting all those moving parts together, we came up with really 2 viable options. One is to split the district in half, give half to Kicker, which would be Arcadia, Indiana, Madison, Sauk, and the other half to Safeway, which would be Huth, Illinois, and Richland Square. Cost increase is about $400,000 over what the district is currently paying. Actually not a surprise, because we all know prices of wages are going up because there's this competition for bus drivers out there primarily. The concern we have with that is the service issues that we've had with Kicker, plain and simple. The second viable option is to go with Safeway for the entire district's transportation, starting with next year. That comes with a price tag, about $1.1 million over what the district is currently paying. The only concern that we have in making this recommendation to you is that the company is new to the area, but I'll talk a little bit about some of the mitigating concerns with regard to that. So who is Safeway Transportation Service Corporation? Because it's certainly not a company that we hear of a lot here in the south suburbs. However, they have been operating successfully up in Lake and North Cook counties and in Wisconsin, and they have a desire to expand into the south suburbs. So they have secured a 3-acre facility in Markham with a maintenance facility attached to it. They recently signed a contract with Andrew High School for the 23-24 school year. Their management's very experienced. I listed the information there about their management. Their COO, Bruce Barr, who's actually here tonight, has 40 years experience in the bus industry. And like I said, they're looking to expand in this area. They currently have 135 large buses on hold with anticipation of gaining more contracts. They have 40 drivers already hired for the Markham facility, and they project to be fully staffed by July 1st. Their pay is probably the highest in the area, $26 an hour with a guarantee of 6 hours. Most bus companies guarantee about 4 to 5 hours for their drivers. So just as a comparison, we have met with them multiple times now, asked many questions. One of them is about sub drivers. As we all know, we need to make sure there's a full complement of drivers to handle the routes on a day-to-day basis. And they are providing for an adequate number of sub drivers, including a safety manager, mechanics, and a driver trainer for new trainees. So what do other districts say? Now, included in their bid, obviously we asked for letters of references. They included 6 letters of references, all positive from other districts, but I'm always interested to hear from folks that they didn't include. So I did contact, this says 5, actually called 6 other districts. And all of the feedback that we received was positive. There was one district who kind of gave more of a so-so, but they are currently being used not on a regular basis, but more using Safeway as a supplement essentially for their district because they're having issues with transportation service. Overall high marks, communication, responsiveness to issues, and honesty were the most common things that I heard from the companies, or excuse me, from the school districts I spoke to. The only other concern that I heard in general was that I was the third or fourth person who called about a reference, and you know, how fast are they going to be growing in the future? So because of the issues that we've had with Kickert, service issues with Kickert, despite the price tag, we are awarding that we move forward this evening with a contract for Safeway. It is a 3-year contract. The first year prices that they bid are fixed for the first year. Years 2 and 3 are based on CPI. So the increase in the consumer price index is how those second and third years would be calculated. We would work to identify areas of budget savings, which we already have. So we believe that we can afford this. And obviously, should we move in that direction because they're new to the area, we would start really new to District 162. We would start immediate frequent meetings with them about being proactive, getting ready for the school year, making sure that we're ready to up and run for August. So that's all the information I had to present, but I'm happy to take questions with regards to transportation or any of the other items that I presented this evening.
Mr. Murphy?
Mr. President,
Yes,
if I could,
Dr. Davis.
you have a packet of letters in front of you.
Mhm.
Every day, I send a letter now to Kickert about all of the routes that they've missed. I've never received a call back. Never. They do call, and they meet occasionally, a couple of times a year with Dr. Tomich and with Craig. And it's, I'm not saying that they're not lovely people. We've been with them for years. However, the past 3 years, I haven't been able to accomplish the 3 goals that I have, and they're very simple goals. My expectation, and I haven't had an issue with that in general, is that a bus company transport our children safely. 1. Number 2, we work on a time schedule. It's very, very difficult for our parents. We're now writing letters to employers of our parents to say they're late coming in and it's not their fault. It's our buses running late. That's ridiculous. We've never gotten to that point before. The other thing that is very important to us, we have not been on a field trip since 2019. We have to go back to allowing our children to explore the world. But the reason that we can't do that is because even if we get them there, how do we bring them home? There are districts that have had issues and they haven't been able to get back into the area until late in the evening. I can't take that risk. And so therefore, we've been doing virtual field trips. That doesn't, what about the children going to the zoo? What about the children going to the museums? But last year, against the recommendation of staff, I held with Kickert. I believed their promises. But the last day of the retreat, Dr. Tomich came to me with a letter from them that said, now the last day of our retreat means we're opening that Monday. We're down 12 drivers. One of our issues is, and I'm not sure that everyone is aware of that, I don't know how many buses 163 has, I think 18, 19. We're 56 buses. We are the largest in the South suburban area. We always have, this hasn't changed, but we need to be able to transport our children on a schedule, and we need to get them home. We have gone to Positive Connections, and Positive Connections has taken the Huth to try to take the weight off, because Positive Connections was had drivers. This did not help us. But if I had to give you an example of something I think is atrocious, let me just tell you about today. I started my report by telling you that we were down, we were on virtual education with the Indiana and the Illinois. How many buses do we have to?
10.
Okay, I told Craig, I said, if we're not going to use 10 of our buses that we're paying for, surely we can have all of our buses on time today. I woke up this morning to the same thing. I get all the calls that the parents get. the same confusion, and I have another letter today that I haven't sent to them. But the issue is why. But I wanted to meet this Mr. Barr, and Mr. Barr, if you would just come forward, because I'm a people person. I have to hear you say what it is that you're going to do, how you're going to do it, because this is very important to us. Now, we're not even talking about the older children. We're talking about, we need 56 drivers on a daily basis to transport the children and to do it safely. But if you think back with this, do you know that for 2.5 years, we've been paying in the morning and the afternoon teachers to ride the buses because that's the only safety net we have? At first, I know Craig was disturbed. You didn't think that was going to work. The teachers have held with us. Our teachers have been on every bus, and I think that's what gives the parents a sense of security. However, this is a huge cost for us. And what I'm hopeful for, Mr. Barr, what I'm hopeful is that eventually we will have confidence in Safeway. We will be able to pull them back at minimally to the afternoon. But now we have vans that are taking the teachers to meet the buses, to accept the children, to make sure that, because many of the parents have the phone numbers for the teachers that are on the buses. This is not a business plan. For years, over 20 years, we've been with Kickard. But let me bring something else to your attention, because now we're being approached by some of our neighboring districts asking, do we want to go back into the bus ownership business? We don't want to do that. We used to own our own buses. We had our own barns, but we also took that liability and that responsibility. And I promised the sitting board members at the time that we would not do that, because we need to do what we are experts at, and we are not experts at running a transportation system. But there are a few, but most of those districts are not trying to run 56 buses. Another thing that disturbed me, you're well aware that we had this incident several years ago because I felt that the buses were not up to standard. And we took a firm position. We called in the owner of Kickard. We said, if we didn't see 50 buses out there in our parking lot that were new buses, this was a no deal. And we saw the 50 buses. But after I thought about this, we have to threaten in order to just get what I believe that we're entitled to. And we did. We took a recess, all went outside, look at the new buses.
I remember.
This is how we do business, that we have to have that kind of an upset. But today, when some of the buses, not many, but some of the buses ran as much as an hour late, then I know that we're making a good recommendation. But I don't know if he wants to speak, but I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Bruce Barr. He's Director of Operations, and he, along with Craig and myself, are prepared to answer any and all questions. Good evening and welcome.
And if I may, just for the sake of contextualizing it, Mr. Barr, you're with Safeway.
Safeway, correct.
Safeway, thank you. I know we've kind of been jumping around between three companies. I just wanted to be clear on where you're from. So thank you for joining us this evening.
Little history of myself, just to give you a little history of myself. I've been in the bus business since I've been 18. I'm 64, been in there 45 years. I had hair before I got in the bus business. I worked for Ryder Student Transportation as a manager. I left in 2004 and bought 10 used school buses. And I started a company, me and my wife, called Illinois Central School Bus. We operated 61 garages in 11 states. I did that on my own. I sold it in 2012 to Carlisle Group. We had about 3,300 school buses and 4,000 employees. We're based in Joliet, Illinois. I sold it to Carlisle Group. Kind of semi-retired for 6 years. I was an ag teacher at Dwight High School. I bought a farm and decided I want to raise cattle and pigs, and that didn't work out too well. So I got approached to go back in the bus business. I've been a operations manager for Safeway for 5 years. When I first got there, we had about 100 vehicles. We operate about 900 vehicles now. Our goal is to run a school bus company that's based on people instead of so much on the financial side. The bus business has changed quite a bit in the last 3 or 4 years. We pay drivers $26 an hour, guarantee them 6 hours a day. Most bus companies pay about $22, $23 an hour and only pay 4 hours a day. The difference between us and another company is our guarantees are $156 or $780 a week. If you work for another bus company, you're making less than $500. So that's the biggest difference. We try to run a family owned, and Kickard is Illinois Cook is a good company. They just have something's gone haywire. They are a good company. But I think we're a better company. So I think that we're in, and I'm very proactive on good news travels best early. I told Dr. Davis there that I'm very proactive on communication. I'm not gonna show up here 2 days before school and tell you I'm 30 drivers short. I'm gonna hit the road running. We will have drivers butts in the seat July 1st, and I'm just a no nonsense person. So.
Ms. Murphy, can I know?
Member McCray.
Okay, well, I'm all in favor of the company, any company able to take over our transportation issue. But Kickard came to us with a promise, and they let us down. So this is a new promise. And where are we going to be so far as a contractual responsibility with the new company if they fail us? Are we locked in and keeping them if they don't satisfy our needs? I mean, where are we going to be with Safeway?
So we have within the contract, and we have it in the current contract as well, that the district can exit the contract if they're not fulfilling the contract. Well, and there's another provision that we've utilized with Kickard, and that is that if the bus company is not fulfilling the contract, District 162 can go out and hire another bus company, as it did this year and last year with Positive Connections. And the existing contractual company, in this case, as we've seen before, Kickard, has to pay the difference in costs. In fact, it was just a few weeks ago, we approached them about they were missing 10 drivers and just routes that weren't covered, essentially. And we said, actually, Mr. Barr, we had contacted him as well as a number of other companies. And the price was going to be very high, as you would imagine, to bring somebody in at the very last minute. But once Kickard heard what the price was going to be, knowing that they're going to pay it, we suddenly had 8 drivers within 48 hours. So there are provisions in the contract to protect the district in the instance of bringing in drivers to supplement, to make things work. As we near the end of a contractual year, we also have out clauses within the contract. So if after the first year we're not, the district is not satisfied, it can go back out to bid and provide notice. I think it's 60 days notice to the current carrier that the district wants to do so.
Thank you. Yes, Madam Secretary.
I was just inquiring about the reimbursement rate that we get from the state. How much are we getting now? Have they kept it at about 80% that we get reimbursed?
Yes, so there's 2 types of reimbursement. I'm glad you brought that up because it speaks to some of the cost things that we talked about. So the the state reimburses school districts differently for regular ed transportation versus special ed. Special ed just a straight 80%. So whatever you paid or whatever you spent as a district the previous year for special education transportation, they simply reimburse the district 80% of that the following year. Now, they sometimes will what we call prorate or lower that amount a little bit depending on budgetary constraints at the state level, but that's the formula. Reg ed transportation is a little different. There's a formula based on EAV, and I like to call it a deductible. Think about an insurance deductible, where the district has to pick up the first so many dollars, and anything over that for regular ed transportation, the state pays again a year later. So you're recouping those costs the following year. There again, they have been prorating, I want to say 3% if memory serves me last year. And that changes from year to year, again, depending on budgetary constraints with the state. For regular transportation, there's also the caveat that it has to be students who live more than 1.5 miles from school or have to cross a hazardous route. There's that little caveat in there as well. So when I talked about the $1.1 million increase in cost, the one thing we do have to keep in mind is the following year, about 80%, as you mentioned, will start to come in the form of reimbursement from the state of Illinois. So that will cushion the blow as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Member Johnson.
I seem to ask you a question. Maybe that's for you first, and then follow-up will be with Mr. Barr. Can you talk a little bit about the differential in cost with respect to the teachers that we have riding with the bus? Presuming we get ourselves to a safer environment, we feel like we're not having to hold our teachers on the bus. What does that look like?
So right now, as Dr. Davis mentioned, and this really started when we started coming back from COVID, we put teachers on the bus morning and afternoon. In the past, prior to that, the district had teachers on the bus in afternoons only. And that was during typically during those early dismissal times, the beginning and the end of the school year, and here and there where we needed them. Always, the district has monitors morning and afternoon on Richton Square buses and special ed buses, and that will never change. So when we talk about monitors, we're really talking about non-special ed, non-Richton Square buses. So right now, the district's paying about $600,000 a year to have monitors morning and afternoon. And so as Dr. Davis mentioned about potentially just going to afternoons, you could see savings potentially of about half of that cost.
Thank you. And Mr. Barr, you mentioned the difference in your hourly rate and your hourly cut and the number of hours commitment to your drivers. I'm wondering if you could speak to anything more as to the dynamics about your business that makes it that you all are able to have drivers where others do not. It seems like we're strictly in a driver challenge these days. And so what is it that Safeway is doing?
Well, about 14 months ago, we hired a social media manager at about $100,000 a year. So we have, and we, you know, I'll tell you little stories, but we hired a couple ex-stockbrokers and we set up a call center to hire drivers. Presently, we have right now, when Craig called us, or Dr. Tomic called us about trying to get drivers here, we have 41 extra drivers now that we don't have slotted for anywhere, and we are sending them to 4 school districts, Lake Zurich, Fox Lake. They run out of Oswego. So we have the extra drivers. Again, it's either you stand out on the street with a clown suit and try to hire drivers at 4 hours a day, or you say, I'm going to hire them at 6 hours a day at $156 a day. And you just have to build your business plan around it, because it's not going to change. And, you know, I've been, like I said, I've been in it for 45 years, and the mentality of the school bus industry has not changed. And we're starting to see it now change because of us. You just can't get drivers. So we've taken the approach, you're going to spend more money. That's it.
Thank you. And can you tell me about your safety record, maybe in comparison to your competitors?
We have a full-time safety manager for the entire company. Every office has a full-time safety director. We carry $20 million in liability insurance, which is a good amount for the school bus industry. We just renewed our policy 3 weeks ago. We had a 3% rate increase, which we thought was phenomenal. We have a really good safety record.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Dr. Leatherwood.
before you exit, could you say something about the turnover that you may have with your employees, and then also their credentials?
Pre-COVID, it was about 40% a year. That's about what it's turning every year. You have to build that in your business model. Since we have gone to that $26 an hour, we also pay a $4,000 sign-on bonus for anybody that comes on that meets our criteria. So we pay them $1,000 every 9 weeks to stay. So if you come, like our plan is to, not telling stories, but we're going to go after the other bus companies and we're going to take some drivers. We pay them $1,000 every 9 weeks to stay. So there's a sign-on bonus there. our turnover rate probably is with that wage has been probably 5 to 6%. It's not been a lot.
And you think that you're gonna be able to continue that?
And we're paying $26 an hour, 6-hour guarantee. We $780 a week. That's what we're gonna pay. We also have 6 paid holidays. We pay Juneteenth. That's one of our holidays. We pay 6 paid holidays. We have Blue Cross Blue Shield health insurance, single coverage for $44 a week. We offer an attendance bonus of $50 a month if you have perfect attendance, and that's not missing 5, that's being on time every day. We also do some crazy stuff. We take the drivers, little stories. We take the drivers, we have a family night every month, every terminal. We take the drivers either bowling, they can bring their children, or we go roller skating if they don't break their hips because they got to be at work on Monday. And we do some other crazy stuff about if you don't, your perfect attendance, we draw like a raffle on Friday afternoons at 2 o'clock, and every terminal that has a prize. And it's not so much the prize, it's the mentality of the employees. It builds a morale around them. And it might be a movie tickets or pizza or some fun things, but you'd be really surprised how many people show up at 2 o'clock on Friday. And it's also payday. So we want them there on Friday afternoons to drive the bus. So we just kind of do that kind of stuff.
And to the credentials,
Pardon me?
and to the credentials of your drivers?
And to the credentials.
Credentials, yes. Could you tell us a little bit? I'm not familiar with.
Well, all of the drivers have CDL, drug test, random drug test. We have random drug test, CDL. Our average driver is probably 8 to 10 years, been driving a school bus. We require them to go through a safety meeting once a month. We have Smith system. It's a defensive driving system. We try to be proactive for the drivers. They all have the yellow vests on and that type of stuff.
You train your own drivers?
We do. We have, I was a state school board, not school board, but I was an instructor, school bus instructor. So we have our own school bus instructors that teach the 8-hour, the 2-hour, and then we have driver trainers at every garage. We take the best of the best. And those are the people that the most experienced drivers go through we have a program called Train the Drivers, Train the Trainers, and then they train the drivers. So every garage has their own driver force and that trains their own drivers. And I said, I had 61 garages in 11 states. So you gotta get your act together. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, Member Hutchinson.
Just to clarify, I see that the dispatcher and she is a resident of Markham, that's currently in Hugo. Just to clarify, are we the first district in the south suburbs that employee is going to be working in? And also, does that mean that the employees are they coming from as far as Lake Zurich or Fox Lake?
Christy, the manager that we hired presently is the manager that you're using at Positive Connections. She worked for me when I was with Illinois Central. I had a garage in University Park. So she's transferring here. She's been with Positive Connections 8 years. She lives in Frankfurt. The Bobby, she lives in Markham, and Angie lives in Markham. So they're local people.
Also going to be local.
Yeah, we're going to hire all local people.
The terminal will be in Markham. Is that correct?
It is at it's the old R&L truck terminal. It's at you're going to test me here, 16059 Crawford Avenue. It's a 3-acre lot. We signed a 5-year with 2 5-year extension leases on it. It's 3 acres fenced in, gravelled. We're supposed to move in this week. We're getting internet and phones and all the stuff put in right now. So we're trying to get ahead of the game. We are temporarily set up a hiring at a couple hotels. We've had about 15 kicker drivers trying to apply this week. So we're moving on it.
And I have one question, Mr. Barr, with regard to communication and just simply being responsive to Mr. Englert and to Dr. Davis's post. Is there a dedicated number and dedicated personnel that they will be able to call on any given moment regarding any given issue.
Yes, I gave Craig and Dr. Tomic, I gave him my promise that I would be here for startup for as long as it takes to get this thing fixed. I've already communicating with Dr. Tomic back and forth. He texts me several things. So yes. So the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if I could, because this is a major change, Mr. Barr has agreed to make our home here his home with staff. And so as we go into this change, because this change is not effective July 1st, this is still summer school is with Hickett. We're moving up for the August start date.
Yes.
But I feel that they get to know us. One of my levels of comfort, Mrs. Calvin, the Huth is with Positive Connections. And I was a little surprised because they pay them very well, but he hired that whole group away that we've been working with anyway. And she called us to say that she's shifting to Safeway May 1st. This is a person that we have a lot of respect for. One of the things that bothers me, I don't see a representative from Kickert here this evening. We are their largest client. To me, they should have come with a plan. They should have fought for us. And they have been silent. So that's really all that I can say. But the aggressiveness of this company and the fact that they're doing something that no one else has done, and that is to come in and to route and to plan within our district office here, get to know our principals, run routes and all of that. It's like a dream come true because the startup every year is difficult. Now, I'm not saying that he and Safeway, along with everyone else, won't have some issues initially startup. But what we look at, and when I say we, I'm really talking about Craig and Dr. Tomic and I, after 2 weeks, then you should begin to settle. And on and on. My hope would be that we would be able to pull the teachers off of the morning bus. I'm surprised they don't complain. This is a lot for them to go and to meet a bus and run a route and come in and teach. And they've been doing this without complaint for over 2 years. I don't see us actually taking children and making them necessarily alone, at least not immediately in the afternoon. Something happened on Friday that really shook me up. And that is the police station called across the way and they had a little 6-year-old from the Matteson. And he knew what school he went to, so he identified that and his principal responded. But then, and he was just out. And, okay. He had a 4-year-old with him. And so Mrs. Houston was there with the 6-year-old and the 4-year-old. And then the police became extremely shook up. The 4-year-old was not ours. The little child that was 6 said, "But where is our little brother?" And the police said, "What?" They said, "He's only 2. They looked and they found this little child. And so we're talking about 2, 4, and 6. I want our children at home with their parents. I want them dropped off at the proper stop. And this wasn't that they weren't dropped off. It's just that someone thought someone was going to be at home. So then DCFS came. And the only comfort that these children had is that they know Mrs. Houston, who is a teacher type person, because they're in a police station. So this, when I thought about this, I said, oh my God. But to their credit, the police took flashlights and finally found this little 2-year-old. To me, a 2-year-old is just a baby. I don't know about anybody else thinks it's a baby. Crying, sitting on, he didn't even know which step. He doesn't know his number. He didn't know where he was. But if this 6-year-old hadn't said, "Where is our little brother?" So to me, when I talk about safety, I talk about it's key to have the teachers on the buses, but I think really it's asking a lot for them to do it in the morning and come to school and teach. But in the afternoon, we want our children to be home with someone that is responsible for them. And this was huge. And I believe It was almost 9 o'clock before we cleared on Friday. But these little tiny children, now, true enough, the police were benevolent, but 2, 4, and 6, no. And so they were just, so I am looking for safety for these children. But also, if we don't speak for them, who does? It just so happened in this neighborhood, they knew us, they're right across the street. So they called and we identified, but just children in general, and I've talked to some of you about that, deserve better. But really, because we're their largest client, why aren't they here fighting for us, presenting a plan so that you can hear the plan and you can respond to it? Because I fear, not that they're not decent people, they certainly are, but their management plan does not exist. And what I'm concerned about is that we're responsible for these children. So I understand everything that Mr. Barr is saying. I understand Safeway and his experience. What I want you to feel is what this felt like on Friday with these little children sitting there. We have to take these children home. So very likely we will not save $600,000. We'll probably just save $3 million, because just like Dr. Leatherwood waved at the bus driver, okay, all right, children, because at least we transport little tiny children, and this is significant. But really, Kickard should have been in my office fighting, presenting a plan. They should be here with you, tell we're going to do this, this, and this. 20 years, but where is the plan? So that's really all that I can say about it. But Friday, I realized the importance of those teachers, the importance of the educators, and it's key that we're connected to the homes. And it's Mrs. Houston that had the emergency phone. They don't know their phone numbers.
No.
They don't know how to reach anyone. So to me, it's just us. So that's really, it's us. But they should be here fighting for us.
Agreed.
We will not be replaced. I don't know whatever the districts are going to, but even Mr. Barr knows, I think looking at your numbers, your largest district is probably 47 buses around there. Okay. We're worth fighting for. We are. Our children are worth fighting for.
Indeed. Indeed. Oh, thank you, Mr. Barr. Thank you. Mr. England. And Dr. Davis, does that conclude Superintendent's report?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. That was quite a report. And just to parenthetically put something out there, even if we had one child in that age group, that one child is worth fighting for. So thank you for your report. Shifting gears here, since we're talking transportation, Dr. Davis, is there any legislation?
We will be presenting 2 new laws that will affect us at the April meeting, and the administrative protocol by which we will implement these. But these were actually passed in the fall session, but they will be effective July 1st. One has to do with criminal background checks, and we will present that. And those people that we hire, new hires, and it is a complicated procedure, but what the state, I believe, is trying to do is to make sure that someone that addresses a child in an inappropriate manner is not passed from one district to the other. So now we're going to be mandated to check all of the references. Generally, you give me a reference, we check that reference, but we would not go back into the state system and to check all of the assignments that the person has. And this is going to apply to all new hires, even substitute teachers. So we will bring the protocol and the structure in April, and that's effective July 1st. And then there is a new memorandum of understanding that we signed today to indicate, it's from the Illinois State Police, that if we identify a person or a child to be of clear and present danger, that they be involved. So in a sense, it's not that we're not calling the local police, but the state police are involved, and then they're able to give us additional support. So those are the two things that we'll be bringing, but these laws were actually passed in the fall and it will be effective July 1st. And our attorney as well as administrators are working on bringing them at the April meeting.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Davis. The agenda now calls for new business, and I believe there is at least one, possibly two motions regarding tax abatement.
Mr. President.
Mr. Vice President.
Move to approve the resolution authorizing the abatement of a portion of the taxes heretofore levied by Madison School District 162, Cook County, Illinois, in connection with the receipt of a property tax relief grant for fiscal year 2022.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy.
Aye. And is there another motion regarding tax abatement?
Mr. President,
Madam Secretary.
move to approve the resolution authorizing the abatement of a portion of the taxes heretofore levied by Madison School District 162, Cook County, Illinois, in connection with the receipt of property tax relief grant fiscal year 2023 grant.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mr. Bean.
Aye.
Thank you. And is there a motion regarding security camera equipment?
Yes, please. Move to award the contract for security camera equipment to Applied Communications Group, the lowest responsible bidder, in the amount of $363,670.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Mr. President, if Mr. Evans can, could we, not at this point, but at the conclusion of the meeting, give them a demonstration of the cameras that have been installed and what we can see in the individual schools?
Excellent. Thank you. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy.
Aye. And the next motion has to do with Berglund Construction.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Vice President.
Move to award the contract for the exterior building EIFS work at 4645 Sauk Trail and property to Berglund Construction, the lowest responsible bidder, in the amount of $455,000.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mr. Bean.
Aye.
And I believe there is now a motion for general obligation school bonds.
Yes, please. Move to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $5,300,000 general obligation school bonds, alternative revenue source of the district for the purpose of renovating, repairing, and equipping district facilities.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mr. Bean.
Aye.
At this time, we have, I believe, a motion regarding the awarding of a 3-year contract.
Public hearing.
Oh, I skipped another one. I'm sorry. One regarding a public hearing.
Mr. President,
Yes, Madam Secretary.
move to approve the resolution calling a public hearing concerning the intent of the district to sell $5,300,000 general obligation school bonds, alternative revenue source for the purpose of renovating, repairing, and equipment in district facilities.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? There being none, Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Bean,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Murphy.
Aye. And now we have the 3-year contract motion.
Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. Vice President.
Move to award the 3-year contract for in-district student transportation, Safely Transportation Transportation Services.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Mr. President,
Yes, Mr. Vice President.
I just want to state for the record, our board packet memorializes the extent to which the current provider has not met the requirements of their contract. And this action tonight is an attempt to provide safe and secure transportation for our students. And I'm with you, Dr. Davis, about owning our own buses. My first interaction with this district some 25 years ago was to sit on a citizens committee to evaluate the benefits of going to private contracting of buses services for Superintendent Smutzler at the time. So I don't want to own buses. That's not the business we're in.
Thank you for providing that historical context, Mr. Bean. I too remember that.
When you've been around this long, you know history.
Amen. Amen. Well, we've had a motion, a second, and brief discussion. Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Murphy,
Aye.
Mrs. Hutchinson,
Aye.
Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
Dr. Leatherwood,
Aye.
Mrs. McCray,
Aye.
Mrs. Gordon,
Aye.
Mr. Bean.
Aye.
Thank you. And just this kind of a tidbit regarding the transportation. I just want to take a moment out to give kudos to our teachers who have been on the buses, our teachers, and Mrs. Houston, you know, I'm looking at you specifically, and that your heart of kindness isn't just contained within the walls of the school, but certainly out in the community as well. So kudos to you and to the other teachers who go above and beyond what most people would expect.
And Mr. Murphy, could I piggyback on that for our teachers?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Davis shared with us that we were number one academically. I think we should just say thank you, thank you, thank you to our teachers.
I agree. Excellent. The agenda now calls for old business. Is there any old business that requires discussion?
No, Mr. President.
Okay, any of my board colleagues? Okay, moving right along. Board member issues and reports.
I'd like to have something to say.
Member McCray, I thought you might.
Oh, thank you. It's been a little while since our combined Black History concert, but I want to say it was phenomenal. It was so moving that I wanted to thank the choral trio that enhanced our, if they're laughing, that would be the LMJ trio who were so moved, full throat, throttled, head back, singing of Leatherwood, Murphy, and Johnson. Thank you, gentlemen. You totally enhanced the concert from where we were sitting. And thank you for being there.
Thank you for your kind words.
Thank you. Yes.
At this point, the agenda calls for our last audience to visitors. about any particular item involving the district or the district's business. Is there anyone who wishes to address the board at this time? There being none and there being no further business for this board,